The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Get more at servingworlds.com. 5. April 29th, 2347. Southeast Metro, South Reach City, Riddlemarch Rail Station. Detective Samin Tenjin pulled a small automatic from the shoulder holster under her rumpled black jacket. She let her long jacket fall down over her wrist, obscuring what little barrel the piece had, and walked faster, nose up in the air and looking over top the crowd of morning rail commuters leaving the station. "Where did you go, little man?" The crowd parted up ahead, a current of space made by something shorter than most of the pedestrians. "Hey, watch it!" someone shouted. "There you are." The squat little guy with wide, muscular shoulders was on the move, pushing his way through the crowds towards the secretary. Alan Buck, undersecretary and rising star of the Mining and Resources Department, was either an idiot or way too humble man of the people. Samin wasn't sure which. After only 2 days on the minimal undercover security detail he grudgingly accepted, after his son carried a note in from the front stoop of his elegant downtown condo. The note had the names of 17 miners on it, each with a slash through their names. 17 miners who all died in a mining accident Buck had reviewed and found the mining company innocent of all wrongdoing in. Alan Buck's name was at the bottom of the list with a circle around it. Even then, it was the wife who called the police. When pressed, the handsome political star admitted he'd been receiving creepy souvenirs at his office for a week. A shattered metal drill bit, a nasal cannula filled with sand, and finally a core sample of rock mixed with blood, or what looked like blood. He maintained it was nothing. He received death threats all the time. Samin and Dewey's boss disagreed, which is why Samin found herself turning left outside Riddlemarch Station, following the crowd of business folks to the overflow building where the Department of Mines and Resources was housed, playing second shoe in an undercover surveillance team at the crack of dawn on a cold-as-hell April morning. She put her other hand in a jacket pocket and tapped the send on the radio wedged in her ear. "Dewey," she whispered below the ambient noise level of the commuter crowd. "Old guy, short and stacked, blue coat with hoodie approaching on your 6. She flicked an eye from the threat to Buck, then looked a couple heads to the right for the nondescript black guy in a rumpled overcoat and the thick-furred Elmer Fudd-style tracker hat popular with the suit-and-tie crowd. "Master of disguise, our Dewey." The radio crackled in her ear. "Yeah, I've pegged him getting off the train," Paul Dewhurst answered back. "But good call, kid." "No problem, Dad." Samin rubbed at her ear through the black watch cap as she chucked shit at her partner. "How about you turn down your volume before I need a hearing aid, same as you?" Her partner grunted in her ear. Samin watched Dewhurst's funny tracker hat sink below the crowd. Surprised sounds accompanied a sudden hole in the traffic flow around him. Samin ran. She didn't see anyone yet. She barreled towards the hole in the crowd. It was getting close to Secretary Buck's oblivious but perfectly coiffed blonde head. She looked right. There was another hole in the crowd where the guy she was watching had been. She put the gun in the air. "Police!" she roared at the top of her lungs. "Get on the ground now!" She fired into the air. The sidewalk descended into screaming chaos. She knew people were going to be hurt. She didn't care. Some people stopped. Some even ran to cower beside the building. Buck, despite practicing this with Samin and Dewey, just stared stupidly back at her. But enough people deviated course that Mr. Bluecoat and Hoodie couldn't fly under the radar anymore. He was jogging towards Buck, a long piece of metal, was that a drill bit, in his hands. Where was the other one? The one that had taken Dewey out. She didn't spare a single glance after her partner. He'd be fine, or he wouldn't. First order of business was to find... There. An older woman in a red knit cap was standing in front of Buck, raising something over her head. Another drill bit, same as the other suspect carried. "This is for my chit." The woman's voice cut off mid-word. Red sprayed from her throat as soon as Samin had a clear shot, and she fell to the ground. She was already sighting her barrel to Buck's far side, but the second threat wasn't rushing forward. Where was he? She lowered her weapon a few inches to scan the emptying street. She ran forward, getting past 3 screaming women blocking her line of fire. "Get down!" she roared. One of Buck's synapses finally transmitted a thought. He dropped to the ground. The man kept running. She fired twice, sent her mass. The man spun and fell. She walked over, still screaming suits and ties. "Are you all right? Undersecretary Buck!" The politician nodded. He was bleeding from punching himself in the nose with the sidewalk, but otherwise unhurt. She scanned the woman. Dead, eyes glassy, no threat. She checked the man. His hand was trembling, reaching for the long drill bit. Samin kicked it away and kicked the man hard enough in the face to make him spin away from the drill bit. Weapon still trained on the assailant, she backed up to kneel beside her partner. She heard sirens, which in Reach's thin air meant backup was almost on the scene. She got her fingers around Dewey's pudgy neck. "She just cracked the back of my head. I'm fine," he growled. Then, quieter, "except for my pride." She nodded, still focused. "Stay down. Unis are coming." She stood and crossed to the male suspect, kneeling at his side to check his vitals. He lay in a pool of blood, his face white. She'd put 1 bullet in his chest and 1 in his stomach. She holstered her pistol and waved to the police cars screaming down the road. Despite the blood loss and shock setting in, her suspect had turned himself back over. He was reaching for the woman. "Carla," he called weakly, choking on his own blood. "Dad," she said in a monotone, and jerked her head toward Buck. "Just like you wanted that guy." A flash of hate. "Deserved it. Killed all 3 of my boys." Yeah, she sighed, looking over her shoulder at the undersecretary, almost as white-faced from his nosebleed as her suspect was from 2 likely fatal gunshots. "He's a terror." "He covered it up," the suspect gasped. "They killed John and Billy, and he kept the mine open." His head dropped to the ground. "Carla wanted to kill him then, but I said no. Cole needed us." The hard man started to cry. "Then they killed Cole and sent us a check." Samin closed her eyes. She liked it better when she could hate the assholes who took lives. The dying man coughed blood onto her shoes. "Take our blood. Take our children. All of her earth." He gave up the fight and let go. Samin stood. She looked at her shoe. She looked at Alan Buck. Dewey was standing beside him, gun out, eyes alert in case of a 3rd assailant. Alan had been watching her and the man on the ground. "Did he say anything to you?" Samin just looked at him. He reared his head back and darted his eyes up to Dewey and back to Samin. "What did—" He started again, and then aborted the question. He buried the fear and guilt behind a politician's mask. Red and blue lights colored his face. A squad car screeched to a stop on the road. Samin turned back to the dead father on the ground and stared. Samin didn't feel much, just how she was built. Emotions didn't last if she felt them at all. She kind of understood people, and she latched onto rules that made sense. That had saved her ass, turning her from a punk kid heading to a life in the mines into a cop. Today, she felt something. Since she couldn't ignore it, she drank. She was drowning the ice cubes in her tumbler for the 3rd time when Lena opened the door. Samin raised her glass. "Welcome home, Captain." Lena didn't turn the door and lock it, just slammed it without a backwards glance and knelt between Samin's knees. Lena held her cheeks, taking in Samin's clothes, the glass, her blood-stained pants and boots. She leaned in and pressed her cool lips to Samin's. She tasted better than the drink, and Samin pushed forward for more. There was holding and hard breathing, but no tears. Samin didn't do that. A while later, Lena got her undressed and under the shower. She came back later and dragged her out, threw her in a robe and sat her at their table. Warm soup, spicy with noodles and fresh herbs. Only then did Samin realize how worried her lover was. She switched on the smile. "Thanks, babe. Feels good to be clean. She held up the bowl. Fresh herbs? You're spoiling me. A little taste of home, Lena said. Samin just nodded. Her earther transplant girlfriend was weird about food. Lena leaned across the table. I know how you work. It's fine. You process things differently. Just don't fake it for me, huh? Samin let the smile drop. She nodded, eyes cool, mind still working on the tangle of the day. After more food and sex, Samin felt sleep creeping in. She held Lena the way she liked and hoped her partner wouldn't pussyfoot around her in the morning. She could cook for her again, though. Samin wouldn't mind that. It was terrible, Lena murmured. Yeah, it was pretty shit. Samin kissed her lover's forehead. Dewey's okay, and I'm okay, so there's that. Lena hugged her tight. And you saved Buck from those monsters. Samin didn't like that word. Sometimes people used it to describe her. They had it rough, she murmured. They're never to blame, Lena murmured, so very close to sleep now. Always biting the hand. Who can't? Who bites? Samin asked. Reachers, Lena said quietly, her breathing slow and regular. Samin felt a ghost of an emotion hurting in her chest. She stared at the ceiling until dawn. You have been listening to The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Music, All This by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Hear more of the story at servingworlds.com. Thank you for listening.